This is John for the Everyday Fan Sports. Today I have the pleasure of being on the beat with Hall of Famer Jerry Kramer and author Bob Fox. How are you, gentlemen?
Doing great. Thanks, John. Thanks for having us on.
Yes,
Well, thank
indeed.
you for
Thank
your
you, John.
thank you for your time. I appreciate both of you. Let me start with Jerry first, Bob, if you don't mind. Jerry, you've had a Hall of Fame career. You've written a couple books in the past. I've read your books in the past. Love them. I actually have one right here. The first one. What made you decide to write another book?
Well, there were a lot of moments along the road, along the journey, that were really spectacular to me. I grew up in a little town in northern Idaho called Sand Point of about 3,000 people. And I was born in a town in Jordan, Montana, eastern Montana, of 200 people.
Wow.
And I 200. Yeah, I lived there till I was 6, 7 years old, and then we moved to the big city with the 3,000 people. So I had not been to town a great deal. So walking into the Yankee Stadium, having seen boxing matches and World Series and a number of sports at that incredible venue, it was just awesome to know that this kid from Sandpoint, Idaho, is playing in New York City against the by God New York Giants. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful thrill to be there. And there were so many of those moments that I told over the years and collected over the years. And Bob and I were having a beer one night, and he said, "We ought to do a book." I said, "I've done a book. I've done 3 or 4 books." And I started shipping the bull a little bit and telling him some of the stories, and we decided that it might be the thing to do.
So in this
And
book,
this is,
go ahead.
go ahead, John.
No, go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
sir.
No, this is probably my last book, as I was going to say. I think we're done with it.
Well, it is a good one. I took it out of the library because I wasn't able to purchase it yet. I took it out of the library and read it the last couple of days. Amazing book. One of the cool things about it are the pictures. I especially love the picture of you kicking because I probably knew it before, but I probably forgot it. I didn't realize that you also kicked along with being an offensive lineman. Now,
Yeah, I
so
did.
go
Go ahead.
ahead.
Uh, I kicked in high school, kicked a little bit in college, and so just as I go out early to get my calisthenics to warm up, and the kickers are always there, and I go by and kick a couple of times. And uh, when Coach Lombardi comes, he said, "Get in there and practice. I want you to practice. You can be the backup." So I went and got a square-toed kicking shoe, and that made me a kicker. That was you had to have the square toe at that point. And I got a few blocked, and I got knocked on my keister a couple times, and then I've sobered up and got serious about it and started working at it. And Don Chandler, late in my career, was my roommate, and we would kick each other for chili. Whoever lost had to buy the chili, so it got serious at that point. But I enjoyed it. I look forward to it and enjoyed it. And as an offensive guard, you don't get to meet many people. I used to say, "What do you play, guard?" Uh-huh. How's Horning? How's Starr doing? How's Nitschke doing? How's Coach Lombardi? What's he like? And they still don't quite understand what those offensive guards are doing in there. And my mom and dad came to a ball game early in my career, and I had a habit of butting people with my head. It was a most certain way to block for me. I wanted to hit him right in the middle of the chest. And my mom says, "What are you doing butting those boys with your head?" And I said, "Well, Mom, that's the way a coach wants me to hit the guy. That's the most certain way I can block." "Well, you better cut that out. I'm gonna go talk to him." So she's giving me what for? Because I was using my head to block with. But Coach Lombardi liked it, so I was okay.
No, you could say anything, that you're an offensive lineman and people don't remember you as much as they remember the stars. But people absolutely remember the Ice Bowl, and we're talking 50 some years ago. How does it feel to be remembered for that incredible game?
Well, it's wonderful, of course, to be remembered for anything, almost. But the Ice Bowl was it was a very difficult setting, and I actually suggested that play on Thursday. Bob Lilly played on the opposite side as a defensive tackle, and Jethro Pugh was over me. Bob Lilly had his nose about 8 or 9 inches from the turf, and you couldn't move him with a D9 cat. And Jethro came up. His first move was up. And we're watching short yardage films on Thursday prior to the game. And he does it again and again and again and again. And finally I say, Coach, we can wedge Pugh if we have to. And he doesn't like idle talk or any talk generally, but what? I think we can wedge Pugh if we have to. He said, run that back. So they ran the projector back 3 or 4 times, and he goes, "That's right. Put in a wedge on Pugh."
Wow.
Now when I get to the end of the game, and there's 13 seconds left, and we're down by 2 or 3, and I'm called upon to block Jethro. And at that point, I'm thinking it would have been a much better idea to keep my mouth shut about making a block at that particular time. But I then decided fundamentals, head up, eyes open, good stance, come off the ball, keep your head up, keep your eyes open, go through the block, do it. You've done it 100 times or 1,000. Just do it the way you know how, and do it the best you can do. So I came at him, and he came up, and the rest is history.
Wow, I got chills just hearing about that, because obviously I've seen that play hundreds of times replayed. It's amazing to hear the story from you.
Thank you,
Bob. Let me ask you now. What led you to suggesting that Jerry write another book?
Well, it's funny. Like a lot of kids who grew up in the 60s, I grew up in Milwaukee, big Packer fan. My dad was a big Packer fan from the Curly Lambeau days, grew up in that era. Told me a lot about the history of the Packers, blah, blah, blah. And, I was enamored. The Packers obviously won 5 championships in 7 years, including the first 2 Super Bowls. Then in 1968, Instant Replay is released. And like a lot of people, I got it. And I still read it every year at training camp time. I've read it now 50 plus times, but I never stop loving it. Anyway, so I became a big fan of Jerry's. And then it's funny how we met. We met in 1991, just prior to Super Bowl 25 here in Tampa. Jerry was at a golf outing where a bunch of NFL players were playing at Saddlebrook, which is in Wesley Chapel, right outside of Tampa. And I saw Jerry there, and I had written a letter to Packer Report, where I later ended up being a columnist for that same paper years later. And I showed him a letter about, I had written why Jerry deserved to be in the Hall of Fame. This is 1991, and he'd already been a 9-time finalist at that point. So Jerry looked at the letter, he liked it, and we're talking, chatting a little bit, and we both figured it was just a matter of a couple of years or whatever that he'd get in. Little did we both know that it would take 27 years for that to actually happen. But anyway, I just kept, after I got to Packer Report, and then I ended up going to Bleacher Report after that for, several years. And I got to know Alicia a dozen or so years ago, and she and I got into, we were talking about getting Jerry into the Hall, doing what we could to do it. And she connected me to her dad, and we sort of reacquainted ourselves, and did a bunch of stories about Jerry and why he should have been in the Hall, and also about all his teammates and Coach Lombardi, blah, blah, blah. Finally, after all these stories, like Jerry said, I said, you know what? We could put a book together, all these stories I've done. And Jerry said, hey, why not? And we just kept talking, doing this, doing that. And we also wanted to add not only the football stories, but the off the field stories, talk, with celebrities and all the other things that he's done all his charities and with the family, everything else like that that's never been really written about. And so that's how it all collaborated. The biggest thing in putting the book together, though, is finding the right publisher. And that's what took a while. It took a couple of years to find one. And we finally got Triumph Books, who's our publisher. They're the #1 sports publishing company in the country, and they've been very supportive. So that's great. I just want to bring up one more point. You brought up the kicking of Jerry.
Yeah.
In 1962, Paul Hornung was a kicker up to that point for the Packers, and he actually led the league in scoring 3 straight years, 59, 60, 61. But in 62, he hurt his knee, and Jerry was the next man up to kick. And all Jerry did in 62 was go 9 for 11 kicking field goals, a pretty good percentage. And remember, these kickers nowadays, they come off the bench fresh as a daisy to kick their field goals. Jerry was playing 3 or 4 or 7 or 8, 12 downs before he'd kick.
Sure.
He couldn't rest. He had to just basically get ready and kick his field goal. And I mean, that's not easy. But and then in the championship game at Yankee Stadium that Jerry was talking about, we got 40-mile-per-hour gusty winds, and the bench blew off the sideline onto the field at halftime. It was just really tough to kick in very tough conditions. Jerry kicked 3 field goals and an extra point. The Packers won by 10 points, actually 9 points, 16-7. But the difference in the game were Jerry's kicks. So, he got the game ball while Ray Nitschke got the Corvette for being MVP. Jerry thought, maybe he could have done opposite of that. But
Typical life of a lineman.
The life of the lineman. And then the other thing about the Ice Bowl, and you were talking about that, Jerry, not only did he call the play or tell Coach Lombardi about the play, but when you take a look at that play was over the minute he got into Jethro Pugh. You can see Pugh way up in the air. Jerry had him blocked off, and the 31 wedge, which was what Bart called, was supposed to be run in between Jerry and the center, Ken Bowman. And actually, Bart decided to run into the 3-hole between Jerry and Boris Gregg, and that's where he scampered through that particular hole, but it was wide open. The only guy who had a chance to get Bart was Chuck Howley, who was trying to reach for Bart's empty right arm, because Bart was smart enough to take the ball and place it in his left arm and cross the goal line, because had he had it in his right arm, Howley might have stripped it out of his grasp. So Bart was so smart about not only calling that play, but knowing where to run it and how to hold the football.
See, those are the stories I love. I love those inside stories, and it's one of the reasons why I've loved all of Jerry's books, actually. Bob, one last question for you, Bob. As a longtime Packers fan, lifelong Packers fan, how cool is it for you to work with him and just to collaborate on the book and to see the book in its final product?
Well, I've said this many times. I'm like a kid in a candy store. I really am. I mean, I pinch myself sometimes. And what's funny is Jerry and I have talked so many times over the years, and it's like talking to a buddy or my favorite uncle, however you want to put it. I mean, I just, we don't just talk football. We talk about life in general, or weather, whatever the case may be, family. It's just we've gotten to be such good friends, and getting also to know a lot of Jerry's teammates. I've gotten to know Boyd Dowler, Dave Robinson, Donnie Anderson, Jim Grabowski, Don Horn, so many. I got to know Zeke Brakowski before he passed away, and others. And then back in the day when I was a young pup, I got to interview Bart Starr when he was head coach of the Packers, and what a gentleman he was. And so anyway, yeah, I'm just thrilled to be able to do this. And I can't tell you how many times buddies have come up to me, Bob, you gotta be, what's it feel like to be writing about Jerry or know Jerry? And I go, hey, like I said, kid in a candy store type of feeling. And I'm just so thrilled that we've been able to do this.
I know the feeling. I'm feeling it now. I mean, I'm talking to an established author. I'm talking to a Hall of Famer. I'm actually giddy myself. Jerry, one last question for you, sir. I have to ask this question. I'm from Chicago. I'm a lifelong Bears fan. I'm not going to ask you to pick, but could you talk a little bit about Nitschke versus Butkus?
Very similar. Both great linebackers. Dickie brought it every Sunday. Ray brought it every Sunday. I'd hate to have to pick between them. We happened to be a Bear game where Bart won his Spurs or became our leader. We were playing early under Coach Lombardi, and Bill George was the middle linebacker at that time. And Bart threw a long pass down the right sideline, about 40 yards, and he's standing there with his hands down at his side. I'm standing there beside him. My defensive tackle had stopped, turned around, is watching the ball. Bart's watching the ball. I'm watching the ball. Bill George isn't watching the ball. Bill's coming. So he brings a forearm with him, and he's running at full speed, and he hits Bart in the mouth with his forearm at the elbow, right? Knocks him backwards on his keister. Bart starts bleeding like a stuck hog. He's just bleeding down the front of his jersey. And Bill looks at him and said, "Now I take care of you, Star, you wuss." And Bart gets up, and for the only time in the history of Bart Star, he used a bad word. And he said, "Bleep you, Bill George. We're coming after you." And I said, "Bart, you better get sewed up. You're bleeding like a stuck hog." He said, "Shut up and get in the huddle." I said, "Yes, sir. Yes, sir." So he took us down the field to the end zone, bleeding down the front of his jersey, just flowing down the front of his jersey. And we didn't care for him quite like the tents and things they do today. But the trainer laid him down on the bench, and the doc sewed him up, put about 10 stitches in his upper lip, patted him on the backside and said, "Go get him." So Bart came back in the game, and he talked a little funny because he had a really big fat lip, but he took care of business. And Bart Starr won the quarterback job. We had 4 or 5 quarterbacks there at that particular time, and Bart became our quarterback that day.
Wow, that's incredible. Incredible. Gentlemen, I really appreciate your time. Before I let you go, Bob, you want to tell everybody where they could find out more information about the book, where they could order it?
I'll show the book as well. How about that?
There you go.
Well, I just want to also say that the help we've received from the various people that helped out in this book, for instance, the 4 books that Jerry wrote previous, they were all collaborated with the late, great Dick Schaap. In this book, we don't have Dick, unfortunately, but we have Jeremy Schaap, his son, doing the foreword, which was very nice of Jeremy to do. We have Rick Goslin, who was one of the senior voters that got Jerry nominated, and also he did the presentation for Jerry when talking to the whole Hall of Fame committee, along with Pete Doherty of the Green Bay Press Gazette. Anyway, Rick wrote the introduction in the book. We have other people like David Marinis, the man who wrote When Pride Still Mattered about Coach Lombardi. It's like a who's who list of people that contributed. Mark Murphy of the Packers, Aaron Rodgers, Tommy Lee Jones, the actor.
Wow.
We have a lot of good blurbs or praises for Jerry. David Baker, the former president of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, Bud Selig, the former commissioner of baseball, and all these teammates of Jerry's also added in that I mentioned earlier. It's just a great collaboration. But people can get the book either from Triumph Books, who again is our publisher. Amazon is a great source. Target, Walmart, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, the Packers Pro Shop, Boswell Book Company in Milwaukee. They all have the books. Pretty much everywhere you can find a book, you can order it. And we've been getting great reviews on Amazon. So anybody who's read the book and haven't put a review in, please do so. They've been fantastic, and we really appreciate it. And thank you for having us on your show. We really appreciate it, John.
No, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kramer. Thank you, Bob Fox. I really appreciate it. It's really been a thrill. Like I said, I'm a lifelong Bears fan, but I completely respect everything that the Packers have done. I mean, an amazing franchise. You've had an amazing career. I could go on and on and on because I'm kind of giddy about doing this interview. But I encourage everyone to check out the book. Like Bob said, you can pick it up at pretty much any bookseller, Amazon, a lot of stores. And with
Yeah.
that, I thank you both.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
John.
John.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, John. Thank you. I know you closed it out, but one of the other things that's important, being a Chicago guy, everybody talks about the Bear-Packer rivalry, but one of the big reasons the Packers are still around today was because of Papa. George Halas, he in 1957, when the Packers were thinking of relocating because they didn't have a new stadium, they were playing at Old City Stadium, which was like a high school stadium. He went into Green Bay and promoted a new stadium for Green Bay, and they ended up building what's now known as Lambeau Field. And then also in 1960, when the NFL got that big television contract, George Ellis, along with Wellington Mara and a couple other owners, said, we need revenue sharing. We've got to keep cities like Green Bay in the NFL. And the only way they can do it is with revenue sharing. And so that was another big thing. Plus, in 59, when the Packers were looking for a new head coach, he promoted Coach Vince Lombardi, along with a couple other coaches. But I mean, he was a big promoter, advocate of Lombardi. So he's helped out the Packers in a lot of ways. And so Packer fans need to remember that.
Well, they're two of the greatest franchises.
He had a job coaching at the Pro Bowl. About the third or fourth year, my first Pro Bowl, I went to LA. We'd been in Miami, flew all night, threw our stuff at the hotel, jumped on the bus. Coach Halas gives me a playbook. He's sitting right behind the driver on the aisle. I go back about 4 seats on the aisle. I open the playbook, and the first play is red right 49. It's our play, our color code, our blocking system, our numbers. It's precisely our play. 48, 46, 47, 43, 42, 41, 40. And I look up with my mouth open, and Coach Halas has turned around in his seat, and he's been watching me. And he says, Jerry, we didn't want you Green Bay boys to get behind, so we just put in your offense. And he did. Awesome. He had it perfect.
That's awesome.
And the other thing about Coach, even though Coach Lombardi and Coach Halas, Coach Lombardi's mentor obviously was Red Blake at Army, but as far as mentors in the NFL, he loved George Halas. They were both very similar, both went to church every day, a lot of similarities, and they were very friendly with one another. But Coach Lombardi, and Jerry knows this better than anybody, one of the reasons he always thought George Halas was spying on the team when they were practicing, and that's why he made the Packers wear different jersey numbers during practice. Bart Starr would be wearing number 75, Jerry'd be wearing number 31, whatever. And Jerry can tell the story better than I can, but one of my favorites was when Coach Lombardi saw a guy working on a telephone pole. He's up there by the wires and said to somebody, go up there and check this guy. He might be a spy for hell.
He did. He used anything he could use. If a bird had flown by, he would have said it was a carrier pigeon or something, and then Halas sent it. But he wanted us. He had a term that he used and it was on the bit. Like a horse was going to try to run away, he'll grab the bit. Well, he wants you on the bit. And so he's going to make up a story if he doesn't have one. But he normally had one.
Classic. Oh, it's such a thrill, really.
All right, guys.
I thank you both very much. Thank you, and have a great day.